First off, I thought I was going to have a microphone. I'm sorry, I'll project as best I can. If anyone can't hear me, let me know. I'm kind of a quiet talker normally. My name is Corey Cochran. I started ThatWhichIs Media last year. The company's just me. I studied creative writing at UCF. I actually worked in the film presentation industry for 8 years for Regal. And I decided at some point that this was my new dream, and so when I had some savings up, I funded my own company and decided to give this a try. And that brings us to today. My slide will, there we go. My first game, I'm going to give you a little bit of history of my company because I want to talk to you about why I'm making a Shadow Forever. My first game was a little game called Zimbaldo. It was very simple. It was released into the Google Play Store on March 6th of 2013. It was written from scratch in Java in the Android SDK and Eclipse, and from conception to completion it took about 5 months. This was a major accomplishment for me personally because I had never studied programming, and I had taken an Intro to C class in college. Other than that, I just started from scratch and decided I wanted to make a game. The game released with 4 areas, 4 monsters, and hot monster squishing action. Yay! I don't know why it's doing that. It's supposed to just click to the next one. There we go. Less than a month later, I actually released a free version at the same time that I released 2 updated maps and 2 new monsters for the paid version. And also, here's a copy of the logo in Hexels because I felt like it. But around this time, something that a few of you here, I think I have talked to about this, and some of my closer friends who are here today to support me know about this. I didn't talk to a lot of people in the game development community, and I certainly didn't talk to my buyers about this. The same week that Zimbaldo was released, I suffered a personal loss, and my father actually died. It was definitely an interesting week in my life. I have never felt such a sense of accomplishment and such a sense of loss at the same time. And I wanted to continue to present an upbeat face for my company and for this game, which is kind of hard to do when you really don't feel it. But around rolled April 26th and April 29th in Ludum Dare. Ludum Dare, for any of you who aren't familiar, is a game jam. Well, actually, it's a 48-hour competition with a 72-hour game jam. Basically, it's just a situation where people try to, within a very short period, make a game, usually to a theme. The theme of this one was minimalism. I was actually at a wedding the weekend of this competition, so I put together a game called One Life in Constructs 2, which I had never used before, in approximately 6 hours. And the theme of the game was actually, well, it was dealing with depression and with suicidal thoughts, which isn't necessarily what I was thinking. I understand the separation between myself and my character, but I felt like if anyone else out there was down, I wanted to try to connect with them. I feel like games and all of my forms of expression, I'm trying to connect with people. And what's funny is the game is structured in such a way that because the theme was minimalism, you only hit one button. And that button is, you can see by the picture here, there's a guy standing on the cliff. If you hit the button, he jumps off the cliff. If you don't hit the button, he stands there. And if you're patient, he actually starts to think about some things, and he spells out some thoughts and feelings, and in the end, you live, and that's ultimately the goal. Also, there's a Gattaca reference, if any of you like Gattaca. This game, because they rank games, and game developers actually rank their fellow game developers, won 52nd place in humor, because why wouldn't it? And that's out of more than 1,000 interviews. I think most people just jumped. But so around that time, I attended IndieNomicon #2, which was where Kanal's company presented Wizard Ops Tactics and also Mac the Lion Tamer, which was a game about a reverse merman fighting online. And I was introduced to some of the people who organized the events, and they actually asked me if I wanted to present a game. They suggested Zimbaldo because it was a completed game, and a lot of the games you will see here are completed, but I was also given the option of trying to show something new, something that I'm working on. And so I, of course, if I'm looking at this building towards a presentation in 2014, I was like, well, I want to do something new. I want to do something between now and then, and I can show people the very earliest of the early versus hopefully a year and a half from now. So this was about 2 months ago, and this was when I started development on A Shadow Forever. So the first thing I did was put together my team. I asked my fiance Jackie, Player B Sharapo, to do some design work for me, and that's actually that's my team. And for technology, since I had written the original engine for Zimbaldo in Java from scratch, it was all right. I think it was pretty good. I'm pretty proud of it, but it had some issues. Yes, this is my cat with CG ping pong balls all over. We use the best technology. But for this, I wanted to use, because the question became, did I want to continue to develop technology, or did I want to actually develop towards a game? And I wanted to make a game. And thus far, I've been using Corona, which can export to iOS and Android. Those are my goal platforms. I've been using Fox 2D for physics. If anyone is a programmer, I'm speaking now more to you. And Lime for tiled map integration, Particle Sugar to play around with some particle effects because they make everything pretty. Soon I'm going to be using the Game HUD for game analytics, and that's actually made by a company owned by this guy right here. Woo! Yeah. He loves being called out on things. So for the graphics, we're making all of our graphics, are going to try to be making all of our graphics out of papercraft. I'm going to be using Photoshop, Sketchbook, sound. I've already written 4 songs for the game because I want for music to be an important part of the game in Linux Multimedia Studio. And I do some editing using Audacity. As for the story, the feel, and the themes, coming out of One Life, I decided Zimbaldo was kind of a fun, cute game that everybody could squish monsters, but I wanted to make things that connected with people more. So the story actually comes from a dream I had a long time ago where I was protecting other people's dreams from these malicious nightmares. And I thought that could be an interesting game, hopefully. And we're going to be using handmade figures to give everything kind of that surrealistic feel. We're not going for realism or for cartoon, maybe just kind of an off world. And I love horror, so we want to try and incorporate as many horror elements as we can into the game. But I also laid down some rules for myself. With Zimbaldo, I hadn't strictly defined an audience, and I think I was kind of aiming more for the general audience and the kids, hey. And then when I started looking at the rating systems, I realized that just by having blood in the game, I was already on the 3rd out of 4 tiers for the Google Play Store. And also, it's just not my forte. But I also wanted for the player not to be the perpetrator of any violence. We're not going to shy away from violence in the game, but any violence in the game is going to come from the antagonists. I want this very much to be a game about creation versus destruction as a theme. So the protagonist, the player, is going to be using tools in their environment to figure out puzzles to get around enemies rather than just popping them on the head. And I started to put together some concept art. This is actually, as you can see, we started to integrate on the left side some of the papercraft into the concept art. On the right side was actually my first crack at my antagonist, which is going to be a character named Methuselah, a name I chose because in several Bibles he was considered the oldest man who ever lived, and age is going to play a major part in the ongoing story of this game. Also because when I drew him, he kind of came out as a tree, and for a long time the oldest tree in the world was considered to be the Methuselah tree, although now they have found one older in the same park. See, you learn things here. And of course, then I started to work on the technology because I had never written in Corona. I had never used Lua. So this is something that, again, I'm kind of starting from scratch, but not really, because Corona is a much more robust engine. Some people argue whether or not it's an engine. They do. Corona itself calls it an SDK, but whatever. It helps me to build things. I like that. On the left side here, you'll see I used some graphics from Zimbaldo when I just first started working on 2D platforming. On the right side, it's hard to tell, but that squiggle there actually is involved in parallax scrolling, and you can see I've started to tile the backgrounds rather than just using matte backgrounds. If I can get it to change slides. Here we go. Here are the scans. We're taking high-res scans of the figures that we're using in the game. And on the right side, you can see how painstakingly I am putting these together in Photoshop Elements. I've actually seen some good reviews for something called Texture Packer, which helps you put together your sprite sheets a little faster, but for now, I'm just editing those together manually. Started working on an intro screen because I wanted to have something pretty to show you guys today at least. And on the right side, you can see I actually have the figure starting to be animated and put in, and I'm working with platforms a little. If you guys are into sprite sheets, this is the sprite sheet so far for the protagonist that you'll see play in a couple of minutes. minutes. And that brings me to the conclusion of this portion of the presentation. I do have a single level built in the game so far that I will show you guys here in just a moment, but I'll pause right now and see if anybody has any questions. Don't be shy. I'll never answer any more questions, so this is your last chance. Okay, that's a lie. I'm going to be sitting right at this table afterward. And you can, I'm going to have all 3 of the games that I've talked about so far today set up at the table so you can come play any of them. Alright, so the game I have so far, yay, here's my pretty logo screen.